Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to our fourth webinar of a series dedicated to M365 Copilot readiness specifically. So this episode will be probably the scariest, but at the same time, the most practical maybe we've done the series so far, because we will be talking about the permissions oversharing and practical steps of how to battle such a situation. So just a reminder, please remember to drop your questions into the Q&A box as we go. Don't hold them till the very end of the webinar, and we'll try to answer all the questions, whether in between the demos or probably at the end of the session. So just a reminder who we are. We are WM Reply, and we are specialists in Microsoft 365. My name is Anton, and today I'm joined by one of our senior consultants, Mike Williams, who will actually battle oversharing for us today. So just setting the context, okay, what is oversharing? Well, basically, what do we mean by the term? By this term, oversharing would mean the situation where content is intentionally or unintentionally shared with people who are not supposed to see the content. And instead of going through the slides, let me just give you a very good example of how it could look like. So I'm working at Fabricam, say, and I'm preparing a salary distribution report for my manager. It's not a very secretive, well, it is, it has the data, but it's not mentioning any kind of private information. So I'm just working on this because my manager asked me to. And now I'm moving from my old laptop to the new laptop, and basically it's not very good practice to store your working documents just offline on a hard drive. So that's why I've decided, like, hey, I have this, I had the SharePoint site basically when I'm normally working with Carly, and I will upload my report in there just to make sure that it stays pretty safe in the cloud, just in case my hard drive fails. And this is just a one folder in documents, library. And actually, let me just share this folder with my manager. So I'll share this with Rebecca. And basically that's it. I'll just copy link and paste it in the chat. So that's what I've done. But also, let's take a look into how the situation actually looks like from Mike's perspective. Over to you, Mike.
Great, thank you, Anton. So I now go in to get my screen up here, and I'm feeling a little bit nosy today. So I'm going to come into Microsoft 365, and in here I've got my Copilot, I've got search, I've got a lot of tools available to me that I can use to surface information. And like I said, feeling a bit nosy. So what I'm actually gonna try is I'm going to see if I can maybe find some information on pay out there. And we're going to see if Copilot wants to work with me today and help me do that. So I'm going to ask, and we're going to see what it's going to come back with, see if it's actually going to find anything for me. And there you go. It is responding. Generative AI, so sometimes you can get different responses, but it has come back and it's telling me that it's found a document. It's telling me that Anton is actually the person who's gone and authored that document, but also it's telling me that we've got the pay slip for Jane Doe, and it's telling me exactly what her net pay is. So already there we can see Copilot, you know, it's not necessarily doing anything it shouldn't be doing. It's looking at what I have access to. And if anything, it's telling me that there's something behind the scenes probably isn't quite right. And that's how I'm able to come in here, search for this, and it's going to give me the information I want. But I'm also going to build on that a little bit. And I'm going to say, I can see Anton was the one who created it. So I'm going to ask it, has he gone ahead and authored any other similar payslip documents, just to see, you know, is there anything else out there? If he's made the mistake once, is there maybe other information he's created? And there you go, it's coming back to me and it's saying, it can see Anton's worked on another document. It's got a very similar title name, but I can see this one is for a Joe Smith who works in marketing. And there you go, I've got his net pay right there. Is there anything else I want to know? And yeah, just for the fun of it, whilst we're talking, I'm going to ask if it can bring that into some nice columns for me, so I can put it into Excel later. And there you go. It's going to build out a table for me, and it's actually comparing the two people's pay. So just like that, I'm able to find the information that was on SharePoint somewhere.
Wow.
What I can also see is a reference to the document that was created.
So I think now when I'm looking at this, Mike, I know I made a mistake because I've shared the folder with Rebecca, but I actually didn't check who am I sharing or who the site is shared with. Because probably someone was added, like you or maybe even everyone in an organization were added into the visitors or into the members of the site, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So permissions could have already been in place, but you just weren't aware of it. There was nothing there to protect the information. So you thought you were doing your job just fine, sharing it with Becca, but actually I already had access. And yeah, just to kind of clarify on the point too, it's not necessarily Copilot has gone and given me access. I must have already had it in the background. And even if we go and try something like Microsoft Search, and if I search for pay slips, there you go. I'm able to actually get into the same document as well there, and I'm able to find all of them. So yeah, there was something in the background. Permissions weren't set up probably the best. And now suddenly this information is being easily exposed to me if I want to be nosy and go and find it.
Right. Okay. So what can we do with this?
What can we do and why should we care? Great. So we've seen kind of what can be, I guess, almost the outcome of not having, the permissions in place and the correct tools. So let's just kind of expand on that a little bit further. I think we all know in this new age, the amount of information we're generating and uploading is growing exponentially. And essentially, without having proper governance, tools, training, those things in place, it is quite easy, as we just saw right there, what Anton was doing would be quite a normal thing for a lot of people to do, not even necessarily with pay slips. It could be with any sort of information that could be sensitive. We put it into a place that we think is secure, then actually in the background, people have access to it. So, whether you're an organization looking to introduce something like Copilot and AI, or whether you're not, but you are using tools like Microsoft 365, maybe you should start thinking about what we can do to actually protect that information and put some governance in place. And yeah, just some facts on the screen there, which kind of, emphasize that point even further, that, people are uploading sensitive data into the cloud. 13% of documents across organizations tend to be shared with absolutely everyone in the organization. Now, there probably is a normal number there where there would be some percentage you share with everyone, stuff you'd find on the internet, like policies, forms, things like that. But actually, does everyone know where these shared areas are? Because if I accidentally put something in there I shouldn't, then suddenly everyone has access to it. And finally, people are sharing files as well with this accessible to anyone link, which could be forwarded on to someone else. And then suddenly, again, people could have access to information that you just didn't realize. So there's a couple of things which we can start to think about and start to action to actually prepare our content for Copilot, for Search, for Microsoft 365. And the first thing is all around actually getting your information ready for search. So whatever mechanism you're using, whether it be Copilot, Search, something else, basically it can only bring the information to you and surface information if that information is findable. So we'll need to make sure that there are policies in place, the controls are in place, the permissions are in place to ensure that yes, it's findable, but also it's only showing us the information that we should be looking to actually find. And then that kind of moves on to the next point, which is making your information findable, but also ensuring that you have just enough access. So, actually considering when you are sharing content, when you are uploading stuff into the cloud, are you putting the controls in place, the protection in place? Are you educating people so that when content is going up there, they're not, doing what we just saw a second ago and putting highly confidential or sensitive information into an area that might be shared with lots of other people? Are they aware of that? And if they're not, are we at least putting the tools in place to ensure that, we are assisting them, protecting them, and making sure that if information that is sensitive gets into these areas, we can try and minimize and reduce that risk. And yeah, finally, what we're going to do is we're going to go into another very quick demo in just a second. And I think what would be good to look at is, the third point, which is what are the tools that do exist to help us find information for oversharing. When Anton uploaded that document, there was nothing there to really protect it or to even tell him that, yeah, you've just actually shared that with everyone in the organization, or you've shared that with Mike. He was just kind of going about his day-to-day operations, and that's now actually come across to me and he doesn't even know about it. So what can we do to try and minimize that, reduce these sorts of errors happening, and also identify it where it does happen on accident, on purpose, wherever it might be. So, like I said, we're going to jump into the next demo, and what we're going to look at is just a couple of things we can use. First of all, we're going to focus on what is kind of available in Microsoft 365 and out of the box, because there is lots there that can help us to identify things like sensitive information. There's stuff there to protect that information, whether it be manual or automatic. And also there's just things we can do just to help us, audit, so we can, go out there and search ourselves as well to protect it. So for anyone who maybe hasn't heard of Microsoft Purview before, that's where we're at the moment. We're in the Compliance Center in Microsoft 365. And essentially, there's a couple of things we can do here. So Purview, really at a high level, is a family of tools and solutions which we can use to protect and govern our data, which we keep in Microsoft 365. And we're not going to touch on all of them today, but there's a couple of key elements which work really nicely with looking at, when you're looking at things like your Copilot readiness, there's some tools in here which can really, really help us. So the first one we're going to start on is around data classification. And ultimately, that's kind of the first step in all of this. So this is actually looking to identify what is potentially sensitive information or high-risk information that maybe we should consider protecting. So the way that data classification works is it's effectively scanning your environment in the background. And what it's doing is it's looking for, you've got a number of built-in, I guess, Microsoft provide you a bunch of, built-in templates for sensitive information. We can see a couple here, like addresses, it could be debit card numbers, bank account numbers, passport numbers. And this is running in the background, scanning your environment, and it's trying to see if you have any of these in your environment. What you can also do is work with classifiers to train up your own. So maybe as an organization, you have a couple of key types of documents and information which you produce on a regular basis. And you basically want to train your own classifier to identify that. So you can look at things that are repeating patterns and kind of trends that would help us to identify that particular document, and then we can train that and feed that into our classifier as well. So it doesn't just have to be the stuff that Microsoft provides out of the box. You can actually create your own unique ones. For example, the payslip, if we go back to that one, maybe you want to train up some sort of classifier that looks at the way, our payslips, the way they're structured in our organization, and we want to make sure it's picked up whenever one is created in Microsoft 365. But the nice thing you can do then is, if we just take an example, EU debit card number, with the Content Explorer, what we can do is actually see in our environment where that may be turning up in some of our content. So what it's saying here is from some automatic scan is that there's 155 identified uses of an EU debit card number across different bits of content. And I can kind of break it down to, I can see I've got 108 in Exchange. So that might be people emailing EU debit card numbers. We got some turning up in OneDrive, so I imagine they could be Word files, Excels, PowerPoints, or anything you'd keep on your OneDrive. And some in SharePoint, which could be, being in SharePoint could be shared areas. So this already is starting to tell us that the information does exist out there, and that might be completely normal. We might look at that and go, okay, well, we know EU debit card numbers. We should have that somewhere in our Microsoft 365. So it might not necessarily be a red flag instantly, and we might be aware it exists in our operations. But if it doesn't, we know, okay, maybe we should need to look into this and drill down even further and see where it's being used, which we can do. Or we can start to think about, okay, we know it's being used, but have we put protection in place to ensure that, okay, it's being used in SharePoint, which is fine, but are we protecting it? So that's a little bit kind of on, the classification side of things, which is literally just identifying the information for you. What you can do then is move on to something called data loss prevention, so your DLP policies. And DLP is all about now minimizing the risk of that sensitive information being shared with the wrong people. So we've identified the information, we know it's there. Now we actually want to make sure we put something in place to stop it being, sent to the wrong person. So, a really key example might be, the payslip one. If someone, maybe we don't actually want payslips being uploaded anywhere onto SharePoint, that's not where they belong. Maybe we could create some sort of policy that, whenever someone uploads a payslip and it meets, it matches as one of the classifiers, we want to actually restrict that document, lock it down straight away, and make sure no one can access it. But we also want to notify the admin team to say, by the way, a sensitive piece of information which you said you don't want to be uploaded on the SharePoint, we think we found one, and that can protect it, notify people. So it's a really nice way of, if someone made the mistake, and again, it could be completely unintentional, Anton could have just uploaded a payslip, but now DLP is going to protect him and protect that document and make sure actually I can't then go and find it afterwards. But also it can apply to other things as well. So it could be emails, if someone's emailing out sensitive information, bank cards, personal information, we can create policies to actually, manage all of that. I won't go into kind of the detail of creating them, but again, from Microsoft Purview, there's a lot you can do here. My browser's going nice and slow anyway, but there's a lot you can do here essentially to kind of build those policies out and apply them based on what type of information you're sharing across your organization. One other one just in Purview before we move on to the next bit I want to just talk about at a very high level is labeling. So again, this is in information protection, and what labels allow us to do is manually or automatically classify a piece of information so we can put some controls around it. So as just a kind of very kind of generic example, we've got some labels down here which we could be used, and I'll talk a little bit about what they mean. But we can see, you've got, for example, public, and you've got it going more and more kind of sensitive as it goes down, all the way down to highly confidential and finance confidential. So what labels allow us to do is essentially when sensitive information is identified, we want to label it to ensure that it is protected. Now, like I said, that could be automatic, so it could be through the scan. Whenever it finds a certain type of information, we want it to be applied with a label to say this is highly confidential, or this is just confidential, or this is public. Or we want to empower people as well to be able to manually, if they see something that should be locked down, they can go and apply a label to it. And then the really cool thing with these labels, what you can do is you can then assign all sorts of protection to that document. So if, for example, the payslip was, a highly confidential document, what we can say is when we apply this label to it, it's going to encrypt it, it's going to put some watermarking on it, it's going to make sure that only people in the finance team can open it. So there's lots of little rules we can put in place to protect that document. So that's just a little bit, very high level on Microsoft Purview. There's lots of other things you can do in there, but ultimately those sorts of things I talked about can really help when you start to think of things like Microsoft Copilot, which really there is to help us collaborate better, is to help us surface information better, create content easier, which is obviously all wonderful things. But this really, the Microsoft Purview side, what it can do is also help make sure that whilst you're using Copilot, you're protected as well. And the information you're finding, is the information you actually need, and it's not telling me, what so-and-so, what Anton's payslip is. So yeah, really, really good to consider. And also, I'll reiterate it as like a common trend, even if you're not using Copilot, some of these tools are very good to have if you're holding data in Microsoft 365, because it can protect them in lots of other ways. It's not just Copilot. So we're now just very quickly going to hop over to the admin center, because there's in SharePoint. So again, we're still in Microsoft 365. We've come into the SharePoint admin center, and there's just a couple of things in here we can look at as well that could help us. Just some basic stuff we can start to think about. So when we're in here, we have access to all the different sites, and we can see all the different sites created in the organization. Now, let's say there's a particular site that could be sensitive. We want to do some auditing on it. We want to see who has access to it, how sensitive it is. We can actually do that from here. So if we just take a particular site, and we click on that. So Contoso brand, what we can do is we can come into here and we can start to look at, for example, who has access to that site. So we can start to look at the different memberships. So, who are the current admins, who are the owners of the site, who are the members who have access to it, who are the visitors, and we can start to, action them. If we see stuff in there that maybe doesn't look quite right, let's say, for example, I'm looking at the payroll site and I can see in the site visitors, it has everyone in the organization. That might tell me there could be, or that might flag maybe something isn't quite right there, and I can action it directly from here. Also, there's some additional settings as well. So maybe, for example, things like external file sharing is switched on. Again, if that is on a site where people definitely shouldn't be sharing files externally, maybe we can go and change that from here. There's no label on this site at the moment in a demo environment, but maybe we say, actually, we do want to put a sensitivity label on there. And that refers back to the labels we were talking about earlier on that protects your information. So as well as being able to apply it to individual files, we might say we want to make an entire site highly confidential. So anything that lives in that particular container is actually automatically, locked down as well. The information is protected and managed as it should be. And then one other quick thing I just wanted to introduce you all to is also something called advanced management. So relatively new, but part of Microsoft Syntex, you now have the SharePoint Advanced Management. And effectively what this is a series of new tools which have just been rolled out and are still being rolled out, which allow you to, again, help identify potential oversharing, but also give you prompts and tools and recommendations on how you can lock certain things down to make sure, again, you are auditing information, you are protecting it and considering, where some of this oversharing could be happening. So we've got different ones here, but they're not all necessarily relevant purely just to oversharing. There's lots of different stuff we can do in here. But one of the ones I wanted to quickly look at is the data access governance. And where this can be really nice is, let's say we are considering, Copilot or, kind of pushing more people to use things like search. Data access governance allows us to effectively run reports to identify what could be high-risk sites or sites where a lot of sharing is happening or where there's a lot of sensitive information that we might want to audit or consider targeting when we are rolling things out like Copilot to make sure we've got the controls in place. So there won't be a massive amount of content actually in these reports purely because it's on a demo environment. But what you can do from here, so from the sharing links, I can run reports to say, okay, tell me, sites where people are creating links that are shared externally. So if I've got lots of SharePoint sites and where people are creating external sharing links, I probably want to know about that because I want to know how many people outside the organization actually have access to these sites. And then if I'm finding actually there's a significant amount and they could be on sites which are highly, which aren't very, contain highly sensitive information, then we can look at action in that. Anyone links which can be quite high risk. Sometimes the description says it there. So these links is where someone doesn't even require sign in to access them. So if there's lots of these being created and generated across my organization, across different sites, there are other things we can do to protect that. But in this case, maybe I want to run a report so I can actually see where it's happening so I can then look at potentially putting an action in place. Again, let's just say for the scenario, there's a payroll site or a financial site and people are generating anyone links in there. To me, that would be a red flag. That means if anyone gets hold of that link, they can get into our payroll site. I want to see a report of where that's potentially happening so I can mitigate it if it is going on. So these are some really nice reports you have to help you with that. And then we have the second report, which talks about sensitive content. And again, this basically helps us identify, we won't download this now because it might take quite a time, but this helps us identify effectively where sensitivity labels are being applied. We've got highly confidential, ultra confidential. Obviously, if we've got other labels, we can create other reports. But then this can help us really identify where those, sensitive sites are. And again, it just allows us to take appropriate action if you want to secure them, make sure the right controls are in place. So yeah, really neat just to help us, just to build that awareness and help us, start to identify where potential risks are, because there's been a lot of times up until now where it's been, it hasn't been as visible. So some of these tools can help with that. Great. So just gonna minimize that.
Thanks, Mike. So while we're still on advanced management, it's a question published. Are there any prerequisites to have advanced management available for your tenant? So advanced management is a separate SKU. So it's a separate license, which you can buy as an add-on, and it's coming at £2.5 a user a month. So this extra functionality.
Great, thank you, Anton. Well, so that was just a quick overview of some of the tools we've got within Microsoft 365 itself. We looked at some of these, but I just thought I'd call out a couple more just to mention them, because there's some really nice, like I said, it's quite new advanced management. There's more stuff coming in the future. Just a special call out to some of the ones like site access review. So what we're soon going to have is, when we do identify, sites in them reports we looked at which are high risk, we can automatically create a flow to basically get the site owners to go in and review those sites and make sure they are happy with the access. So again, empowering owners and information owners across the organization to go in and start actioning those. Also things like site access restriction, which is another one I thought worth calling out, where if we do see there's an issue with the site, something that's highly sensitive, lots of people seem to be sharing links into it, or seem to get shadow permissions to work their way in. We can do things to say, right, okay, this site's now kind of got a bit out of hand. Maybe people are having access to it that they shouldn't. We can restrict it down to make sure that unless you are part of the security group you should be in to get into there, you can't get in through any other mechanism. So yeah, watch this space. There'll be lots of new stuff coming with Syntex and the roadmap over the next few months, I imagine. And cool. Now, just very quickly moving on to what will be another demo in just a second. And this is the basically the WM reply solution, something that we have, which can also really plug in the gaps with what you get with Microsoft 365 and some of the reports we looked at. There's still a couple of gaps we're looking to address and fill in there, and that is where our permission analytics tool comes in. So what this is a tool that we can plug into your tenant, and effectively we can do some of the things we've called out on the screen there. So being able to, well, first of all, scan all your SharePoint and OneDrive content. And then what we can do with that is we can, try and get ahead of any potential problems. So, if you are looking at, for example, rolling out something like Copilot, or you are looking at doing something that suddenly might surface information to a lot of people, a tool where which we're about to show you in a second, this can help you get ahead of that. And it can do that by basically assessing your environment and looking at some of the analytics and pulling out data to show us where access is kind of being permitted. If you're doing things like a Copilot pilot, we'll look at an example in just a sec. Again, what you can do to use this tool to make sure your pilot users are prepared and they're not going to be finding anything they shouldn't. And it kind of works its way down to, because it's a tool we've created using, out-of-the-box stuff in Power Platform and Microsoft 365. It means, the tool is extendable. We can customize it to add additional features like automation, custom reports, what it is you might be looking for. But rather than just talk about it on the slide, I think what we're going to do is just jump into one final demo, which is to show you guys the tool, again, at a high level, just to give you a bit of a feel for it. So this is the SharePoint Permission Analytics tool, which has been developed by us at WM Reply. And essentially, at a very high level, it is there to basically help you identify and see where there could be potential oversharing issues on your tenant, and start to kind of take that information away and break it down to, the different objects to see what users have access to which sites are maybe being overshared. Are there groups of people which are having access to stuff which they shouldn't? So what we'll do is we'll take a quick look at the tool. We're just on the home page here. And we're going to start off by looking at something that's probably quite a good place to start. When Anton did the payslip example earlier, that's quite a common thing where there could be areas on SharePoint which are shared with more people than you realize. in particular, because you get something out of the box, which is to be able to share with, everyone in the organization. It's probably quite useful to see where that's actually being used, because it is very easy for people just to go ahead and say, yeah, I don't mind everyone having access to this site. And it can help minimize the risk of, doing what happened earlier. So I've clicked onto that. It's going to generate a report in a second. And what it's going to say is, so we can see here, we've got everyone except external users. So that is a group in Active Directory. If I want, I can look at all the different groups I've got, whether it be a security group, a Microsoft 365 group. But in this particular case, I want to see where this group, everyone except external users, which contains 36 people, which in this case is my entire organization. I actually want to see where that group is being applied. So effectively, what I'm asking the report to tell me is, tell me which sites exist where literally everyone in the company has access to it. And it's going to come back and it's going to do that for me. So what we're seeing here is a list of the different sites that do exist, and kind of can scroll through each of them to look at each site. But I can also see, what role they've been given on the site, where exactly they were provided that role. So in this case, I can see they point to a membership group and how the access has been assigned. Now, at a very quick look, this, you might look at a lot of this, and I would hope in most cases we'd look and we'd say, okay, that's fine. If it's intranet-based stuff, I'm sure they can have access to it. But maybe, for example, we've got the leadership team. If that is supposed to be an area that's locked down just to the leadership, and it shouldn't be an area which everyone in the organization could access, that might, to me, point out as a red flag, and might start to think, right, okay, why is it that everyone in our organization has been given access to the leadership team? And I think as we go through here, you'll start to see kind of other little patterns. So, where people are being in it, we saw a HR team up there, might see things like a finance team. And actually, in this case, I can see where it's got personal in it. Everyone's actually been given access to one of the admin's OneDrive accounts. So again, it doesn't just work with SharePoint, it looks at OneDrive as well. And I'm just able to very quickly, at a quick glance, be able to see, where people have access to what. And I can see that all of these sites up here, as it currently stands in my environment, everyone has access to all of them. So that could be something I need to go away and I need to action. So another cool use case that we might look at on this particular app is, let's say, for example, we are going to be doing a Copilot launch, and we actually want to run maybe a pilot group of users to kind of execute that pilot for us. And we want to make sure, let's say we're giving license out to 10 people, they're going to be using Copilot, telling us how it works. But the first thing we want to do is actually make sure, if we're going to suddenly give them, this tool to use and give them the ability to surface information really easily, maybe we should check what they currently have access to and do a little bit of an audit, just to proactively get ahead of any potential problems, and make sure that the type of stuff they do have access to is right. Now, with the tool, which we've got here, quite a nice thing we can do is quite literally list out all the different users in our organization and get a view of effectively how many sites they have access to, how many groups they're in, how many directory roles they've got, so any administrator roles, and then we can start to dig down even further on that. So Megan Bowen, if she was going to be one of the users who's actually going to be testing out Copilot for us, we might say, right, okay, let's do a quick audit on Megan's account just to make sure that before we surface all this information or give the tools to do that, that there's nothing in here that kind of is out of the ordinary, could be risky, could kind of affect us as an organization and our usage of the tool. So again, really nice way of just kind of breaking it down via groups. So seeing which group she's in, which gives her access to different sites, and we can kind of see all that information clearly on here. But we can also look at where Megan's been given direct access to particular sites as well. So we've got all our different sites here which Megan has access to. And actually, while I'm looking straight away, I can see, for example, we're seeing some named people here, and I can see the personal link, which so that tells me it's a OneDrive. So again, at this stage, if this was kind of prepped for Copilot pilot, then I can see, okay, should Megan be having access to these people's OneDrive, or is this an issue? And actually, we need to look at, maybe taking some actions on some of these permissions and access to make sure we're not pulling information out or Megan isn't seeing stuff that she shouldn't be able to see. So again, really nice way we can use our tool to support with those sorts of things. And if we just go back up to the home page, a couple of other really cool things we can do. So we looked a little bit at where sharing links, you know, with the SharePoint Advanced Management, it had some tools around sharing links and limited access, but we can do all that here as well. Shadow permissions is quite a, it can be quite difficult to stay on top of sometimes. And by shadow permissions, I mean, again, where maybe you've got your SharePoint permissions, you've got a site where all your team has access to it, but then people start sharing individual folders, files, links to different bits of content on that site. Sometimes it can be quite difficult to stay on top of because it's not always so obvious who those people are who have limited access, but also it's not always super obvious what exactly they have limited access to. So again, this report is a really nice way of actually marking out all the different users who have some form of limited access and seeing actually what it is they have limited access to. So I can kind of work my way through here. You know, I can see Alex has limited access to Deborah's OneDrive. If I go into Adele, it's going to show me all the different areas where limited access has been provided there. And again, a lot of this might be fine. Just because you've got these sorts of access doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. But if there's anything on there which could be a red flag, we can mark it and we can action it. And also it might make us think, should we put some policies in place to maybe, you know, limit the way that kind of limited access and these sharing links are used, put some sort of expiry in place, for example. But again, this tool is just great at kind of interfacing a lot of this information. And it goes beyond this as well. There's lots of other bits of functionality we can do. This is just a very kind of high level overview. And Anton, unless there's anything else you'd like to add on this tool in particular, I will pass back over to you.
Oh, you can pass back over to me and I can
Perfect.
see whether I can add something. Cool, let me share my screen again. And basically, just before we go into the kind of the wider context of the readiness for Copilot, I just want to say that something that we've heard from the concern we've heard from some of our clients when we're talking about oversharing and they're doing the permissions assessment is that we are not encouraging organizations to stop sharing because sharing is caring, and actually the information which you have access to is providing to the Copilot more kind of ground and more context to reason upon, right? So then you can actually ask about the projects that you're working on, and then if you have access to the files, for the project files, Copilot can actually generate really great, meaningful content for you. And that's amazing. This is exactly what the tool is supposed to be, because if no one is sharing information, or when everything is locked down, you're not utilizing Teams and everything is shared only in individual chats, then Copilot doesn't have access to a lot of information. So the quality of the generative content it produces will just drop. So we are encouraging sharing, but then sharing should be, again, controlled, so it should be put on the guardrails. So that's why some of the tools that we are talking about today are so important. So thanks, Mike. I think it was a very good overview of the tools which are available for you today that you can that you have under your IT belt. But as usual, we always recommending to approach this topic of oversharing in a very structured way as part of the comprehensive program of work. So what we've shown you today is just one of the pillars of the kind of Copilot readiness that we offer to our clients. So this is the technical readiness and the governance strategy. And this is just one of the things that you can do today. But then also we're encouraging you not to just apply a plaster, like a hot fix to your permissions today, but also to plan for the future. Like, how can organization look like within a year or within 5 years, where all the sharing is controlled and where the information is protected and managed with the proper data governance tools. So if you would like to know more about what we are doing in preparation for Copilot and readiness, check out on the YouTube channel, because we have more videos about it. And yeah, reach out to us. We will be always very happy to have a conversation. And meanwhile, we have few more questions. We have one more question published in Q&A. The question is, can I restrict highly confidential content from Copilot reaching the information? The answer is yes, and the Copilot as a tool is evolving very rapidly. So 1 month ago, I would probably answering this question, I would say no, but today, yes, for sure. So Copilot with recent updates will respect the highly confidential labeling and will not use highly confidential information as a source for its generative content, whether it's in Word documents or PowerPoint presentations or in M365 Biz Chat. So I think that's all the questions we have. There's a QR code on the screen. You can scan it. You can register to our next webinar where we can share more insights on how can you get most of your Copilot licensing. So not just limited with the technical readiness, actually readiness for the Copilot, but actually see how examples, some best practices and use cases, how to really get most out of the Copilot license and get the best return on investment, because the tool is not coming for free, fortunately or unfortunately. I think that's it from me, unless there's anything you'd like to add, Mike. No, Mike.
No, I'm all good. Thank you very much, Anton.
Mike is good. Okay, then I think our brand red slide saying thank you. I take it it's no any other questions in the chat. So thanks everyone for joining us today. And yeah, looking forward to see you again soon, and have a nice afternoon. Thanks everyone.
Thanks all.